listeners might be aware that we've been off the air for a while. I think it's like 2 months now, or maybe just under
something
2 months.
Like that.
Yeah, it's something like that. I've briefly discussed this on the channel as to why this is occurring, but this also affects the podcast. So I thought it would be only right, particularly for the patrons, to kind of give people an insight as to what's going on, minus the gory details, and just what to expect in the upcoming future. Sound good, Bill?
Fine by me.
Lovely, really depressing way of starting an episode, but here we are, 2020, everyone. So a thing has happened in my life that has kind of thrown my life and my family's life into a bit of chaos at the moment, and we all sat down and had a talk about what is to be done about this thing, and logical thing was that I had to make some changes to my life, and that also means make some changes to Artifexian, namely not being able to work as much on Artifexian for those familial reasons. This also goes for the podcast, hence why we've been away for over a month. I don't foresee this situation changing readily in the near future. So it could be a while, folks, of very intermittent content on my part because of this. There is very, very, very little I can do to change this. So you just have to stick in there. And I apologize for this, but like, again, 2020, the best year. So just a heads up for everyone, just to know what's going on, so you're not in the dark and being like, where is Artifexian X, Y, and Z? And also for patrons, obviously, I still need to make a living in this time, even at a time of reduced content. So I would love if you could stick around for me and us through this time. But if not, that's also entirely cool. Like, it's up to you. So if you're like, well, I'm not going to get massively regular content for the next while, I'm going to cut funding. That's entirely cool, and that is, go for it if needs be. But I would encourage you, if you can spare it, please do, because we do need to still have an income. So worrying times over the next while.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I know not a very fun way to start an episode, but a necessary way to start an episode. In a complete change of theme and feel and mood, shall we do some follow-up, Bill?
Let's.
Okay, so I have two things to bring up from the Reddit from the last episode, which occurred those many years ago, and they were two corrections. We erred twice, significantly erred in our previous episode, and one was we had a discussion about we were talking about raw materials and ores and resources, etc., and how they could run out. And I think we referred to like iron running out. And the Reddit made it very clear that iron is in fact reusable, and it is technically a renewable resource, which is not something we indicated, and not something I really knew until I thought about it. And then we got into a really cool discussion in the Reddit about like almost like a resource sequestering, where a resource may not be may be renewable, but like it's not very renewable if it's tied up in structures, like iron tied up in steel and all that sort of crack. And I really like that that discussion. I think it might even be cool fodder for world building, as in world is running out of X material, but X material is everywhere. It's just that it cannot be used because it's being sequestered. That could be a fun little thing. So yeah, correction on iron and its reusability.
And thank you for that correction, because that is good to know and has soothed some of my anxiety on that particular topic.
But then we got a heap of people being all like, do you want to hear what we're really in danger of running out of? And then we got the existential threat of like helium is leaving. There is.
Why did you have to bring that up?
I see the Reddit, pal. But anyway, and then the other one, I was kicking myself for this one, absolutely kicking myself for this one, is the dilithium. I said that dilithium is not real, as in dilithium is a made up fantasy resource in Star Trek. That is not the case. There is in fact IRL dilithium, and knew this, but having read up on like Trek back in the day, I just, for some reason, my brain just left me in that moment, and I caught it in the edit, and I was like, "Oh, Edgar, you numpty." Dilithium in real life does not power starships. It's not it's not used in combustion. It is literally a very boring gas, if I recall correctly. So yeah, second.
I'm gonna slightly disagree with that correction.
Oh. Okay.
Because the word is used for, it's like a molecule or a substance that's two atoms of lithium, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that's not what it is in Star Trek.
Yeah, but like
in Star Trek, it is a totally different substance. It is an element. So it is still, like, the word, it uses the same word, but it is not at all the same substance.
That is true. But maybe the problem here is the word, isn't it? Because like it's almost not like a proper noun. It's almost like a recipe, you know, like dilithium, 2 lithiums, and there's only
and that's foolish on the part of whoever coined the phrase for that use. But like, you're not wrong to say that this thing in Star Trek is fictional.
Oh, right. Okay, so Bill has spoken. Apparently, we only made one error in the last episode. I was completely
There's an ambiguity. There's an ambiguity.
Yeah, no, for sure. But anyway, dilithium exists both in Star Trek and IRL. In Star Trek, it's this wonderful substance that creates FTL travel, or enables FTL travel, and in real life, it's just mega boring. Which is always fun. So those are the 2 corrections from the Reddit. Have you got anything in the Reddit to bring up, Bill?
No, that's pretty much everything, I think.
Cool. All right. Some email. Now, last time we didn't do any follow-up, because why was that? Oh, yes, because Plato's Republic killed follow-up last time. So I've decided to do more follow-up this time, just to kind of balance the books in a way. So the first item of follow-up comes from a chap called Samuel Edwards. So Samuel writes into us and says that they're having trouble keeping their conlanging organized, and they ask the spreadsheets I've used in previous linguistics videos. Where did I get them, and can I get a link or a copy to those? Real quick, the answer to that is I made them myself. And then 2, can I get a link or copy to those? The answer is no, because they no longer exist, because up until about a year or 2 ago, I was very bad at doing backup. And when I changed computers, stuff just got lost, and a lot of our early Artifexian stuff got lost. So that's part of them that got lost. So I can't give you those spreadsheets, but they're easy to make. Just use Google Sheets or whatever, and just put stuff in spreadsheets, and you'll be grand. Yeah.
Cool, yep.
Elijah Thomas, I'm going out of order here, Bill. I'm going renegade. Elijah Thomas writes, I was wondering, is there any plans to make an in-depth guide on how to use Illustrator? It seems like an overwhelming program to start using for map making. The answer is no, because there's an ample amount of Illustrator tutorials out there. Quick tip, though, in terms of overwhelmingness when it comes to programs. And this applies to everything from like cheap plates to Photoshop to Illustrator, anything you might use in word building, is that all of these programs are overwhelming. And I always feel overwhelmed coming to them. But I always try and remember the sort of 80-20 rule, which is like you can get 80% of what you want to do done with 20% of the tools. So people look at the interface and they're like, oh, there's a gazillion tools everywhere. Really, in Illustrator, all you need to know how to do is locate the pencil tool and you can start drawing. And everything else just kind of follows on from that as you problem solve. Like, oh, how do I change color? And like you find that, and then you find the next thing. So be okay with the overwhelmingness, and then just know that you only need to master 3 or 4 tools to get you 80% of the way on the way. And that has helped me whenever I switch program, and I'm like, oh God, what the hell is this? So quick tip there. And Illustrator tutorials all over YouTube. There's ample stuff out there.
Great, yeah. I mean, look, there's so many resources on pretty much any software out there if you know where to look, and it's not hard to find where to look. There's no end of sites with tutorials and even paid courses and free ones or whatever.
Yeah. And to be fair, the YouTube stuff is like, sure, everything I know about Artifexian, I've learned through YouTube in terms of using all of the apps that I do use. So that's like After Effects, Premiere Pro, Illustrator, Photoshop. Like that's all just YouTube stuff. Like I've never taken a paid course. And so, yeah, TLDR, YouTube's the place to go. You'll be grand. So then our next email comes from Jim K. And Jim K asked about how to design good plate tectonics. They write, how do you come up with good tectonic plates? The issue is that I can't really randomly draw plates, and when I try, they look nothing like the plates on Earth. So I was wondering if you have any methods to decide the lines that make up the plates, any random generation processes, or taking inspiration from everyday shapes, etc. So I think we might have answered this before, but I get this question an awful lot, so I thought I'd answer it again. The most accurate but the most unsatisfactory answer is practice. Like the more you do a thing, the better your eye gets at the thing. So just keep churning and burning, just keep sketching stuff on paper and just keep going through it, and eventually you'll be like, oh, I really like this shape and that shape, etc. I don't have any tips for random generation process because I don't like them. You'll further email in a second on that. Inspiration from everyday shapes, absolutely. There's loads of fun on like the world building Reddit. At least it was a while ago, where people would like take a picture of some rusted pole or whatever, and it would look like a country or whatever, and you can like take that shape and go, oh, I'll use that. Or I like sometimes I do tea stains, like as in tea stains on a piece of paper, and they just end up making a shape or whatever, and then I kind of like reverse engineer the plates onto the land masses, and then very often go, oh, well, actually, in order to make these set of plates work, so I have to insert this extra little plate here to make sure all the directions are going in the correct way, and then that creates a mountain chain here and things like that. So trial and error, and then you can totally draw inspiration from everyday things like rust, stains, anything like that.
One I love is a half-dry footpath after rainfall. Like, you know, the way it doesn't usually dry out completely evenly. There'll be darker, wetter patches.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they often look like landmass shapes.
Actually, I never thought of that. Actually, yeah. Do you go around like just taking pictures of your local footpaths in your smoking jacket?
Yes, to the smoking jacket part, but no. But I have like taken pictures of ones where I thought, oh, that looks cool. Just like where I happened to see one and be like, oh, it looks like a landmass. Click.
Yeah. So you can draw inspiration, as with any sort of art. You can draw inspiration from everyday life all over the place, you know. But yeah, it just, how do you get good at it and how do you make good plate tectonics? Just practice. That's all I can say. Churn and burn. This is how you get good at any sort of art. Our next email comes from Michele. This person clearly is Italian.
It's Michela.
Michela. Okay, cool.
Or Michela. Yeah, in Italian it's Michela.
Michela writes in on the topic of plate tectonics as well, but this time specifically asking about random generators. At the core of their email, they write, what do you think about simulating the plate movements for like 2 billion years to obtain a genuine, quote, random but kind of scientific proof continental shape? So my thoughts on simulations and generators are that personally I only use them for inspiration and nothing more beyond that, because I feel like if you just rely on generators all the time for your land masses, your cultures, your languages, etc., you've just like created a world that's almost free of any of your autonomy and any of your artistic sensibilities, whereas I much rather just make something that maybe isn't 100% scientifically accurate because it isn't based off a model, but has my artistic style imbued into it. So I kind of veer away from generators in everything. Like I really don't like them. In terms of the simulating like a history over 2 billion years, that doesn't really need to be simulated. Like you can simulate that, or you can give the impression that you've thought about these things in where you place like old and new mountains. So if you have like, new mountain chain here and there's an old mountain chain on the other side of the continent, that must mean that other side was once on an active subduction zone, an active convergence zone, and now it's no longer, and the mountains have worn away. You can hint at that thing, that kind of evolution, without having to do all the work of like actually evolving a planet, just by wisely locating features. So I think you don't actually need to simulate the thing to give that sort of deep history to it. They mention Tectonics.js. And this is the thing that a lot of people like, and I keep hearing come up. I don't like it, and I'm probably the only world builder who doesn't like it. Again, for the reasons of like it has none of my autonomy in it. It's just computer spits out. This sounds so Luddite like, and I love my computers, but like
the Luddites were awesome. But anyway.
That's fair. Computer spits out landmass and then makes small tweaks, and that's my world. It just for me that seems really not satisfactory. And I really enjoy the process of like starting with like a single brushstroke on a page and building it all up, and then at the end I have this like glorious thing that is 100% me. I really enjoy that. They go on to say, harder question. Continental rock age and typology. I would love to manage to find a quick system to, quote, randomize scientifically the composition and age of rock in continental plates to make a more realistic aging and distribution of natural features in my world. So again, this is the sort of idea, like, do we need 100% scientific accuracy here? Do we need to go to models? Or can we kind of hint at this with kind of wise placement? And I would be on the latter. Like, you can totally be all like the ancient cratons, go here, and here, because that's kind of where they go on Earth, etc. And just through reading a Wikipedia page about like, I think they're called shields. I think that's what they are, like areas of different rock around the world. I think they're called shields. I'll throw the link in the show notes once I get it. Just study up on that, and then you can imbue that in your world without doing all the modeling sort of stuff. And again, as per the previous point, too heavy a reliance on modeling takes away autonomy and your own artistic sensibility. So that's why I don't. TLDR, anything to add there?
Yeah, I mean, I've nothing particularly against the generation and randomization and things, but it has to be tempered by your own decisions, artistic or otherwise. Like, yeah, I don't think you can just make the decisions for you. That won't really get you anywhere. And I think it can be a good starting point, or a good thing to break through blocks, or to just kind of get going. But yeah, your own creative decisions and autonomy should overrule that, in my opinion.
And I think as well, a lot of reasons why people do kind of go to generators is because, this is me maybe projecting slightly, but I think people feel like they don't have the necessary artistic skills to be able to just do it all themselves. If that is the case, just want to really implore people that you really don't need a great degree of artistry to do really nice maps and things like that. As Bill has demonstrated on the show before, if you're really crap at art, you can make your maps be in-universe artifacts, as in like a field drawing or whatever. I'm not saying that you're bad at map making, Bill.
None taken. Jesus.
But you did. No, you said so expressly. You were all like, this. Maybe you said it off air, but you're like, this map looks really bad, but it's a field report. The scouts report in the field.
No, I did. Yeah, I
did. So you can do that, and then also like you don't need to have great artistic sensibility to draw like squiggly coastlines. And if you watch my series on the map making, again, you don't really need a whole bunch of like artistry there, because it's just, pick a color palette, steal it from Wikipedia, draw loads of squiggly shapes and fill them in, and just the more detail you put into the thing, the more skillful it looks. Do you know what I mean? It looks complex and massively skillful and hard to do or whatever, but it's really just loads of really simple shapes. So I'm firmly of the belief that anyone has the necessary artistic level to do map making and things like that. So if you're going to generation because of this, like, I can't draw or whatever, give the drawing a shot. I bet you can. Now, so next email is from Thomas Roggenbuck. And they write, I find it interesting that in English we have unique numbers for 1 to 12, and in Spanish they have unique numbers up to 15. Could these be from old bases that were used before base 10 was adopted? Answer, yes. I'm not sure what exactly for English and Spanish, but the notion of like, could these be old bases? 100%. And there's loads of language where you find, French being the canonical example here, where you find like the remnants of, I think it's the base 20 system left in their counting. And so that happens all over the gaff. So yeah, totally 100% is a thing.
In Germanic languages, the unique words for 11 and 12 come from it's like 1 left over and 2 left over. So it's an extension to decimal.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I think so, yeah. It's something like that, yeah. Or it's like 1 additional, 2 additional, something like that.
Oh, you're dead right. Would you look at that? So elf, in German, the word for 11 is elf.
Mm-hmm.
And then apparently this comes from Old High German, according to Wiktionary, which is Einlif. And ein is like eins is the modern word for 1. So Einlif here sounds very much like 1 left over or whatever. I don't know what lif is because I do not speak Old High German, but it certainly looks like it's it has 1 built into it. That's really interesting. What is 12 then? Never actually thought about this before.
Zwei elf, I guess.
Oh yeah, must be from old. Not quite. Old High German, Zwölf. Wow, that sounds so much like 12. That's great. Zwölf. So yeah, obviously it's a what's the word for a concatenation of zwei in this ilf sound, or lif sound. For the life of me, I can't think what lif became in modern German. What is that word? I don't know. I can't think on the fly. But there you go. But certainly though, you any sort of like thing like that can be remnants of an older base. Like it's absolutely plausible to do that.
Yeah, I like that specific example. I think is not the case, but sure, languages do stuff like that.
For sure. Now, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Oh, okay, cool. So the last 2 emails, spend slightly longer on them because I think they have interesting discussion points. The first one is directed at Bill. That is Tom Ashworth's email. Do you want to give it a blast there, Bill?
So this is from Tom Ashworth, who's listening through the old episodes. And says, in an early episode, I talk about the divide between sci-fi and fantasy, that science fiction looks towards the future. And Tom says, I think that's worth discussing because I'm not sure it's true. Now, I think what's being referred to there, now this is several years ago, so I can't remember exactly what I said, but I was referring to an article by a writer called R. Scott Bakker.
Yes.
Called The Skeptical Fantasist. And I actually have it open here. And he says something like, where science fiction, one might say, constructs pseudo-knowledge of the future, fantasy fiction reconstructs the pseudo-knowledge of the past. So that's a little different from it is looking into the future necessarily. I think it's more like it is extrapolating like things that we might one day know to be true. Whereas fantasy is about stuff that we thought previously might one day be true. Now Tom brings up some interesting stuff here that many works of science fiction are set in the time they are written. Like cyberpunk comes about as the internet and communication technology is beginning to be invented, and stuff written in the 60s might refer to things like ESP, which were considered a little bit more scientifically plausible at the time. But in that case, you're still looking at things that might turn out to be true, or seeing how the effect of technology, where that might lead us. Mm-hmm. And in the final example given here is Middlemarch by George Eliot. And it's suggested that Middlemarch might be the first science fiction novel because it's about how the lives of women were impacted by the advent of railway travel, how technology changed their lives. Now, that's a really good point. And definitely the thing about the influence of technology is relevant here. And that is a case where it doesn't necessarily construct pseudo-knowledge of the future. And I think you could have a broader definition, definitely, of science fiction encompassing things that look at how technology affects lives and how the changes caused by technology. And I can even think of a series you could argue is science fiction that is set very much in the past.
Oh.
Yeah. I think I've mentioned this before. The Baroque Cycle by Neil Stephenson.
Oh, you have, yes.
Yeah. And I think you could make a very strong case that that's science fiction because it is largely about technology and the invention of technologies, and more so than specific like physical technologies, the invention of new concepts and new modes of thought. Mm-hmm. But that's set in between about 1660 and 1720. And it's about the invention of kind of modern economics, and steam power becomes kind of relevant towards the end and stuff like that. So yeah, I think there is something to the distinction between pseudo-knowledge of the future and pseudo-knowledge of the past that Bakker suggests. But it's not exactly that it's looking exclusively towards the future. It's more about seeing how things could be, even if you're looking at concepts from the present. And then, as I said, it does leave out stuff like looking at the influence of technology in general, which I think you could definitely make a case for, as in the Middlemarch or the Baroque Cycle.
That was very comprehensive, Bill. I was like, oh, we'll have a back and forth, and we'll discuss like, what the definition of things, and just as you kept talking, I literally have a pen in front of me here where I've just jotted down notes to bring up, and then you'd bring up a point, and I'd be like, oh, talk about this, and then immediately the next line you address that, so I'm like, okay, scratch that, and now I'm left with like, yeah, well played.
Sorry.
No, it's good. I think Tom's point is I think it's very interesting. The notion of like what it means to look into the future. I, even aside from everything you just said, like I found the idea of like sci-fi being very much of its time. It doesn't disqualify it from looking into the future. Because you need to start somewhere to look away from that, And it seems perfectly natural that even if your intent as a sci-fi author is to really examine the future, you must do it from the perspective of the present.
Yeah.
But interesting point, and certainly the thing about the first fantasy novel, I really was like the first sci-fi novel. I really was like, what could be considered the first sci-fi novel? That's a really interesting to think. Like, who was that pioneer that decided, or that didn't decide, but like inadvertently opened the gates to this genre? That always thinking about those things always is very interesting to me. Like, what was the first fantasy novel? Like, the definition of these things, I think, is very interesting.
Yeah. I mean, Mary Shelley is often given the first science fiction novel title.
Frankenstein?
Yeah.
Yes. Nailed it. Never read Frankenstein. Is Frankenstein? Is it good?
As I recall, yeah, I haven't read it in a long time.
Okay.
But, yeah, it's quite different to the image of it in popular media, like from film adaptations and stuff.
Oh, so Frankenstein for me is mad doctor wants to animate corpse. Mm-hmm. Corpse gets animated, runs amok. What's different?
He doesn't really do that much running amok. He runs away, and he kind of hides. He hides in like a shed beside a house, and he learns to speak that way. But he's like really sympathetic. He's not a monster. And Frankenstein is like the doctor, Victor, is quite horrible, and is not that sympathetic. Yeah, it's interesting. Like I said this before, I like to compare famous archetypal characters, or famous iconic characters in popular media to their original versions, and like they're so often very, very different.
Oh, can you give us another example?
Well, I mentioned Tarzan before, a couple, maybe a year or so ago, and do you recall what the first thing Tarzan says to Jane is?
No.
So, well, like what's the classical thing that Tarzan and Jane say? Like, that's
me Tarzan, you Jane.
Yeah. And in the original book, Tarzan, by, I think it's Edgar Rice Burroughs, the first thing Tarzan says to Jane is, "Yes, Jane, it is I, your primordial man come from the forest to claim his mate."
Oh, and so in the original work, again, listeners, I'm sorry if we've already covered this, but I've already forgotten. In the original work, is he? Does he speak in that sort of like caveman-esque manner, or is that a thing that we've just glommed on to Tarzan over the years?
Yeah, that doesn't happen at all.
So he doesn't do any of that like ungrammatical stuff.
No.
Oh.
He can speak the ape language of the apes who raise him, like from his childhood. He learns to read English independently of that. And then the first actual human language he learns to speak, he can communicate in written English, I think. But then he learns to speak French, and then he learns to speak English.
Wow! Oh Jesus, he did that. He was on hard mode there. He learned how to write English first before speaking it. Good God! Oh, so that's the thing that we've completely changed. That's mad. Yeah. That's mad. Any other ones?
I saw a reference to Sherlock Holmes in something recently, and the gag was like the person was like referring to Sherlock Holmes as like a weak English nerd, but instead I'm like Sherlock Holmes, but I'm also strong. Sherlock Holmes was immensely strong.
Strong as in like physically strong. Like he was physically
strong.
He was
yeah. Now that's changed a little bit in recent years with for example, the Robert Downey Jr. film, where he's a accomplished bare knuckle boxer. But a lot of the depictions over the years have not kind of incorporated that element of him. And the thing like elementary, dear Watson, I don't think is said in any of Conan Doyle's works, and Watson is kind of downplayed as a sort of a bumbling sidekick in a lot of adaptations, and Watson's pretty cool.
Oh, to be fair though, I think the one true adaptation and what I think of when I think of Sherlock Holmes is the Basil the Great Mouse Detective from Disney. So every time someone mentions Sherlock Holmes, I always think mouse. And then when someone goes, Robert Downey Jr., I'm like, no, imposter, go away. That's no good. It's the mouse.
The same way that Robin Hood is actually a fox.
Robin Hood is a fox. Not actually, is a fox. It's important. Just I'll backtrack in a second to this definition of sci-fi with the whole technology slant. Handmaid's Tale. Mm-hmm. Would you class that as sci-fi, or what would you class that? Because I mean, lots of people go like, it's necessarily sci-fi if it's set in the future, which I believe Handmaid's Tale is. Like, it's not set present; it's set in some near future.
It's certainly set in the future when it was written. Yeah. Yeah,
exactly. So lots of people, I think, would say, oh, that's necessarily science fiction. But then under the definition of science fiction, it has this technology sort of tie-in very often. There's not really a whole heap of that going on. That's particularly like looking forward into how technology develops or whatever. What would you say? How would you classify Handmaid's Tale?
You could make a case that it is, because of what is the circumstance that has caused infertility? Is it a disease, or is it a side effect of a weapon or something?
Oh, I don't remember.
It's one of those two, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I think it's the former. I'm going to put my neck out and say it. I think it's the former.
Okay. So that is kind of positing a future where things are different than they are, and how society, or a reaction to that from a society. So yeah, I guess you could. It's not very central. Like the fact of the technology isn't very central to, or sorry, the fact of that difference, what the disease or weapon or whatever it was, isn't very central to the story. It just kind of, it sets up. It's a device to set up the plot and to set up the setting. But I mean, I think you could still make a case. It doesn't have to be that central, I think, in a lot of science fiction. And Margaret Atwood has written other stuff that's definitely science fiction. So yeah, I started that out by thinking that I would say that it wasn't, and the more I talked about it, the more I decided it kind of was.
I mean, because it falls into the definition of looking into the future. It's like it kind of. I think a lot of people would argue that it takes real world current problems we have
Yeah.
and extrapolates them out to their sort of like worst end. So that it fits the definition of, or at least my definition of, take what is at present and see where it might go in the future. So for me, it will be science fiction. It's just really weird to think of science fiction as science fiction sans lasers and, you know, the interweb and the Matrix and things like that. This sort of low-key science fiction or whatever, low science fiction. Live correction to myself. The reason why they're infertile, apparently, according to a quick Google, is inorganic farming and radioactivity. Was cited in season 1 episode "A Woman's Place."
Okay.
So it's all because of the farmers and the radioactive bombs they've been dropping.
We thought Roundup was bad.
Roundup? What's Roundup?
Oh, it's this like pesticide that's super polluting and is used too much.
We're going to go tangenty like crazy here. Apologies, internet.
Sorry, it's not a pesticide. It's a herbicide.
What's the difference? Oh, it gets rid of plants.
Yeah. So it's like a weed killer, I guess.
Yeah, Agent Orange. I remember
God.
learning about Agent Orange as a kid and being like, that is the most bizarre name ever. And I always thought it was very I don't actually know why it's called Agent Orange. I never looked into it, but I always thought like it's almost, what's the word, like emasculating of the product. You know, it's kind of like you take this like incredibly dangerous thing and then you give it a fun silly name like Agent Orange. And even as a kid I was kind of like, that's weird. Like it should be called like, I don't know, dichloride oxytryptamine or whatever. Like that feels like an appropriate name, but Agent Orange is just, I always found it, there's a big cognitive disconnect there.
Yes, but looking at it from the point of view of its use, are you more likely to think it's a war crime to spray half a country with Agent Orange, or it's a war crime to spray half a country with dichlorotriptychlamine?
Do you think that? Do you think there was? Do you know? Do you think, or do you know if that was a deliberate ploy, or was it just like people nicknamed it because it? I don't know. It was orange or whatever the hell.
I don't know if it's deliberate in the way that I exactly the way I just presented, but human nature isn't to say I am doing war crimes. You know,
for sure.
Like people are going to come up with ways to downplay horrible things they do.
Yeah, that's fair. And yeah, certainly calling that chemical Agent Orange definitely does that. Agent Orange, god damn it. Okay, so final email, question mark.
Mm-hmm.
Question mark, exclamation mark, interrobang? I think that might be a case for a good interrobang there. Final email comes from, this is a directed bit as well, but I'll try to read it out. I'm here now. Comes from, I'm going to pronounce this wrong, Alexandra Hollanda. I think it has the weird ash symbol in the middle, so I don't know how to pronounce that. Alexandra. One of the questions Alexandra writes is, finally, do you think world building through music is feasible? By this I mean a world where most of the information is told through pieces of music. This is a riffing on the diegetic nature of what Bill does. I know of 2 bands that have done something like this, and those are the Mechanisms and Steam Powered Giraffe. Firstly, before Bill answers this, Steam Powered Giraffe, A+ name. I love. Thoughts, Bill?
I mean, if this is directly to... Oh, no, this isn't to do with diegetic world building. That's a separate question.
I think it follows on from it, though, because it's the notion of, like, the world is communicated solely through music.
Yes,
and that's a form of diegeticism? Diegesis?
Not necessarily.
Well, I guess not necessarily, yes. Yeah, obviously, but it can be.
It can be, yeah, but I don't think that's the intent of the question. Like Jeff Wayne's War of the Worlds. That's absolutely telling a story through music, but it's absolutely not diegetic.
That's fair. I'll take that.
Where most of the information is told through pieces of music. I mean, like, there are examples of storytelling in music. without external context. Although I think it would be interesting to do it diegetically for sure. That, you know, all you hear is the in-universe music and what conclusions you can draw about it from that point of view. The things that occur to me, there's a band called Abney Park, I think, who are, I'm not a particular fan of them, but their shtick is they're a gang of steampunk airship time travel pirates. Yeah. I mean, like it's a medium as much as any other, and you can use it to tell stories. So I see no reason why you couldn't use the music to tell a story.
And the boyos, the steampunk time travel pirate dudes, their music is solely revolving around their adventures in their fictional steampunk world.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, surely a lot of bands fall under this sort of idea of like they create a sort of fantasy around them and only ever sing about the fantasy.
Yeah. Like Gwar have a whole mythos. There's a band I've mentioned before called Tectonic, who have a couple of different kind of cycles of stories. They're sort of symphonic and a black metal band. I'm going to have a quick look at who these two bands are, because I'm not familiar with them. So just maybe this will
do it.
Tell me more about the issue of the diegeticism.
While Bill is Googling, I think this got me thinking about Skyrim and Bethesda, and how Skyrim is littered with a whole bunch of books. There's like hundreds of books that tell the story of the world. Mm-hmm. But like, as much as I like reading world building, I was never pushed to read any of the books in all the quests and all that sort of jazz. And it got me thinking of like, that would be really interesting if in a Skyrim style game that those books are replaced with music. So instead of going into a dungeon and having to read like the 100th book to find out who the Black Spider is and their history, you just wander into a bar, and every time you wander in the bard is singing a different story. Mm-hmm. Explaining the world that way. I think that would be a really interesting way.
That'd be awesome.
Of doing it, yeah, because there's nothing worse. I hated it so much in Skyrim, where it's like, I just wanted to get this dungeon done, and then you realize you don't really understand why you're doing the quest to do whatever, and you realize, oh, I need to actually read all these bleeding books to understand why the hell I'm doing the thing. And it's like, why are you making me read here, like, game? So I think doing a bard, telling the story of the world through bards, that way would be a lot better.
Yeah.
And it's a natural extension of what bards do, you know?
The thing that would worry me there is if the music itself was kind of either bad, obviously, or kind of uninteresting, or just kind of lazily done without thought of, like, the actual style. Yeah, I mean, if it's just going to be kind of 3 chords and telling a story, that would be very lazy world building. Mm-hmm. Only, I mean, obviously, if it's like a post-apocalyptic thing in our world or whatever, that would be different. But if it was a fantasy world and it was just like totally using 20th century concepts of musical organization, that would take away from it a little.
But you could totally get away. I take your point, but you could totally get away with that in a Skyrim style thing. Like, just have them sing Renaissance style music, and that suits it down to a T. Even though Skyrim is not on Earth, and their ye olde music probably wouldn't sound like our ye olde music, but like that sells the idea of it.
Yeah.
And most people wouldn't have the ear to understand whether or not the ye olde music is accurate. Or sounds right. They just kind of like, once you whack a lute on things, it's just like, yes, that's ye olde. When that's obviously not the case. Do you know what I learned literally yesterday? I learned a word that I've now forgotten. It's called faux bourbon, I think.
Okay.
Something like that. And apparently this is, I never learned this in college, but it's a sort of guiding principle of Renaissance harmony.
Huh.
And the idea is that it was very stylistic for them to, sorry, internet here, music nerdery, very stylistic for them to chain first inversion chords together one after another in parallel motion. And that was called faux bourbon or something, which I think stands for like false root or false bass or something. The idea that the root note isn't present at all. It's all just first inversion. So I was like, and I was messing around on my MuseScore thing yesterday, and I just like jotted down a quick piece, stringing together loads of first inversion chords. Turns out, sounds shocking Renaissance. Like Insta-Renaissance. It was great. So that's a thing I learned yesterday. Always learning in life. Now, where were we? Oh yeah, bands. Have you checked out those bands?
I couldn't find anything on the mechanisms. But Steam Powered Giraffe, so they have their own fictional mythology. With band members portraying characters both on stage and on record. And there's like a whole fictional universe. So, absolutely possible. There is a story and a setting there, and the medium you were telling it through is music. There's absolutely nothing to say to stop that. So I would say look into Gwar, because they tell a story. They're extremely silly and a lot of fun. And look into Tectonic, who have, as I said, several. It's kind of Lovecraftian, sci-fi, high fantasy stuff. Pretty cool.
So, real-time follow-up before we crack into a bit of world building. It's the music thing I talked about a second ago. Is Faux-Bourdon, Fauxbourdon, not Faux-Bourbon, Faux-Bourdon. And I'm assuming it's pronounced all French like. So I'll throw a link to that in the show notes for any music nerds who want to check it out. Just correcting myself on air. Okay.
I would expect so.
Bill, you have some world building for us. Give us a shtick and then read it out.
So, last episode, you asked to learn more about the structure of the Tamar Company. And who am I to deny the fans? So that is what I have written. I have written the Constitution of the Tamar Trading Company.
Legalese incoming, folks.
You know the way that you say sometimes my writing is a little bit too archaic? Strap in. The Constitution of the Tamar Trading Company. Hereby, founded in the great city of Jakav, a company and association of traders and people of worth, to undertake trade activities, hereby defined as trade of goods, prospecting, exploration, and all associated activities required for the protection, security, and fulfillment of these pursuits, according to the rights ancient and perfect, granted to us by tradition, by our heritage, and by our gods. Hereby, we secure permission to build, to commission the building, or to otherwise procure vessels, factories, warehouses, and other such necessary constructions to undertake trade activities. Governance of this company shall be undertaken by a Board of Finance, invested here with the authority to set overall company policy and direct the activities of all subsidiary entities and organizations. Membership of this Board of Finance shall comprise shareholders of the company, agents of the company, and vessel captains of senior rank, selected by a general vote of all shareholders of the company, and representatives of each subsidiary entity, chosen by selection from within the subsidiary entity they represent. No individual may hold 2 memberships of the Board of Finance. Ownership of this company shall be divided into equal shares that may be freely traded. Ownership of a single share grants a single vote in matters pertaining to membership of the Board of Finance. Subsidiary entities may be granted authority under the Board of Finance to undertake trade activities on behalf of the company, with such exceptions and limits as defined by the Board of Finance. Subsidiary entities are not permitted to issue shares. Subsidiary entities are permitted to issue bonds and loans against their own ventures. The company fleet and armed forces are the entity in possession of the company, comprising the total sum of the company's vessels and ordnance, secured in order to preserve the security of the company's trade activities. Authority under the Board of Finance to command the fleet and armed forces and manage military affairs is granted to the Military Commission, comprising vessel captains of senior rank elected from among their number. The Tamar Company currently comprises the following subsidiary entities: Western Office, Eastern Office, Southern Office, Usin Office, Anshes Office, Transolien Office, Hoitan Office.
Cool. Two quick things. One, I don't know what I'm going to put music. What music goes under a piece of legalese?
I don't know.
That's going to be an interesting adventure. And the other one is that
Just a lute, make it sound Renaissance.
I was going to say actually no music and maybe try and put some reverb on your voice and make it sound like you're reading it in a courtroom.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, we're doing that then. Bill agrees. I don't hold me to that internet. Well, sure, you've heard what it is. We'll see how it goes. The other thing is that last bit where you listed out the various subsidiaries. You have a really good sort of robocall voice. Western Office, Eastern Office. It was real like I'm calling my ISP because I have a complaint. And they're like, for home and broadband services, press 1. Western Office. Eastern Office. It was really good. So I'm kind of a bit sad is the wrong word, but I don't know. Sad maybe, yeah, let's go with sad. That we probed the structure of the company so much last month, because a lot of this it feels not new to me. A lot of this feels like it's stuff that it feels like you've codified some of our ramblings last month, which is cool, but I should have kept my trap shut next month and waited for this. Unfortunately, but still really great. A style point here for anyone not reading, Bill has capitalized the first word or two of each paragraph here. Do you have any notions to why that occurs?
None.
Yeah, it's just a thing.
Well, I mean, maybe it's just like... So you're scanning the document and you want to get to the bit about ownership. You can see ownership in bigger letters. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, that works fine, but it works less okay when the first word is like hereby or according. That doesn't really...
Yeah.
It seems to me, because again, this is a style I see an awful lot, but it seems a better thing to do would be to capitalize all proper nouns. So instead of capitalizing hereby or whatever, or say instead of capitalizing according, capitalize rights, ancient, and perfect. So then when you're scanning, you go, oh, that's the rights, ancient, and perfect bit, as opposed to just the first word. I don't know why.
You know what?
What?
I might actually do that.
Oh, there you go. Oh, that changed.
I might change some of that around. That's
okay.
a good point.
So listeners are now reading a document that we are not reading. So that's going to be interesting. Okay, cool. Can I go through my points?
Please do.
First paragraph. The Constitution of Tamar Trading Company, paragraph 1. Hereby founded in the great city of Jikav, a company and association of traders, and here's a bit I would like to know about, people of worth. People of worth is capitalized, so that makes me think that it's not just rich people or entitled people. This is a proper noun for a group. Am I right? What is people of worth?
No, it's not a specific group, but it is. So the kind of the context of this of this document, I originally wrote this as a charter, and then I was thinking, but that a charter is kind of the authority being granted by someone else, and that doesn't fit in so well with how I've thought about the overall shape of Abeski culture. So I decided it's a constitution. It is their own declaration of their own intent, and the Tamar Company works on its own authority. And that's a very roundabout way of not even actually answering your question. But people of worth is a kind of an understood term within Aveski culture and legal culture that kind of just means both aristocratic people and people of sufficient wealth.
I've been watching Downton Abbey of late, Bill.
Really? Is it any good?
I think it's great. I hate period dramas with a passion. I find them dull and indulgent. But Downton Abbey is great crack. So like that review should give you an idea that it is actually genuinely a really good show. But I bring this up to say that in it there's this tension between like the landed gentry, like the aristocracy, and people who are just rich. And there's a kind of like, even though we're kind of like, I guess we should on paper be part of the same sort of societal rank. We're not, because you're not, you like, for example, they mentioned in the show that the difference between us is that we're both stinking rich and we both are extremely privileged, but you make your money, whereas I inherit my money, and that is somehow a call for distinction in this culture. I find it interesting that it's in Nabeski culture, it seems to be that distinction is not there. It's just, if you're stinking rich, you're all good to go, be you an aristocrat or just a self-made person.
Yeah, so it's a little different. There is a bit of distinction, but it's not nearly as strong. They're not as concerned overall with inheritance and blood and family. The aristocracy exists, but it is more possible to access it through having wealth. The interesting thing about what you were saying there about we're both stinking rich is that kind of is the difference in that if you're nouveau riche and you lose your money, you're not nouveau riche anymore. But if you're gentry and you lose your money, you're still gentry. That's kind of that's like the interesting dynamic there in a lot of that historical stuff, and it probably exists to some extent today. And that, like, the rules don't make any sense. The rules for behavior and conduct don't make any sense because you can't learn them. You just have to be born into knowing them. And that's a barrier to entry.
Yeah, and a deliberate one. I'm assuming.
Absolutely. An absolutely deliberate barrier to entry, yeah.
No. It is fun watching, though, Downton and kind of experiencing those things and them talking about those barriers and kind of being like, why on earth? Particularly Maggie Smith's character, because she's kind of she's the, sorry, you haven't seen this, she's like the
she's the dowager.
She's the dowager, exactly. And so she's kind of like almost like the kingpin who kind of like she has authority over Maggie Smith, the kingpin.
The dowager duchess, as played by James Gandolfini.
Yeah. But she has kind of like authority over everyone, or at least she has the social status to be able to speak out against everyone. Whether her actions actually affect things is debatable, but she's on top of the tree, so to speak. So it falls on her character an awful lot to kind of be the sort of gatekeeper in a way, like to tell everyone why they're not following all those archaic, strange, opaque rules. And it's really fun as a person who's, not landed gentry to like look into that world and kind of observe like a voyeur and be like, you strange people. It's great crack.
That's something that I really enjoyed in Poldark. That his character is like consciously and very deliberately rejects a lot of that. So he's like a slightly kind of scandalous character. To the other aristocrats, and he behaves in like all these unacceptable ways, but he's really cool in a lot of ways too. For that reason.
And it's mad. Sorry, I realize we're getting away from this constitution, but hey, this is what the show is now. It's mad the way. It's a mad, like, looking at what is considered to be unacceptable behavior. Like, at least in the case of Downton, it's like, it seems to be just these completely low-key, arbitrary things where you're kind of like, why is everyone getting their knickers in a twist here? Because someone kissed someone who was not in the correct social, and you're like, but it doesn't matter. And this weird sort of like honor tradition that goes on as well. Like, we don't say this to this person because that person is this person, this, but this weird. It's just the whole thing is very strange looking out from the outside. Point being, sorry, just to take it back to the Constitution. The divide between landed gentry and just rich people is very obvious in Downton. I think it's cool that in a Besky culture that divide seems to not be so obvious.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what I was going for.
So, second paragraph, to undertake trade activities hereby defined as trade of goods, prospecting, exploration, and all associated activities required for protection, security, and fulfillment of these pursuits. Just for a word building point, I really like that because that final line, the all associated activities, really grants the company the power, or at least they grant themselves the power to just like do all sorts of nastiness into pursuit of trade goods, prospecting, exploration. I think that's really cool, and reading between the lines is a good bit of character building for this company. So well played.
Thank you.
I'm assuming that was the purpose.
Yeah, like pretty much. They're a quite a militarized organization, and like most of what we've seen about them has been from a kind of a military point of view. Mm-hmm. And this is the authority by which they do that. Protection, security, and fulfillment of these pursuits has a very broad interpretation. Yeah. And, anyone who is familiar with anything about, how militaries get used in colonialism, or even in kind of contemporary authoritarianism, protection and security are kind of, they're used to excuse a lot of things.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's like, obviously, because if you go to someone, we will provide you protection and security. You're like, that is a good thing. Like, these are good things, and it's very easy to ride those good things to not good places. Like, it's just a good sales pitch to just tie your ideology to protection and security. Paragraph 3, according to the capital letters, rights ancient and perfect, granted to us by tradition, by our heritage, and by our gods. Talk to me about this rights ancient and perfect. That seems like a thing.
This document doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's based on a long tradition of Abesky culture and Abesky legality, that they have the right to organize and to trade and to create such organizations. And that it's not really, they're not, as I said, this isn't a charter. It's not coming from being granted by a monarch or a state. This is building on a thing within their culture that they have the right to do this autonomously and to establish their autonomy this way.
Right, but the rights ancient and perfect, is this like a book? Is this a codified thing? Like, can an Abesky person wanting to know more about the Abesky culture go to their like Library of Congress and pick up a copy of Rights Ancient and Perfect, or is this more of a metaphorical statement?
It's more like an oral tradition or a kind of a common law kind of situation. Law.
That's exactly what I was about to say next, common law. Okay, cool. And also I love it, the shock and manifest destiny vibes here of that third paragraph, so I really like that. Not because I like manifest destiny, but the kind of it is a God-given right for us to trade and prospect and explore, and aren't these all wonderful things? I think that's pretty cool. So next thing I'd like to know is, could you talk to me a little bit about how the membership for the Board of Finance works, how the governance works?
The Board of Finance is the kind of overall governing body, and they set policy, and they have their own budget, which like they take proceeds from below, and then they can assign them year on year or period on period, and they make those decisions and make kind of decisions about overall directions to take, things like that. Membership is made up of shareholders or agents of the company, so the people like directly employed by the company in roles, are vessel captains, so the military element, and those are elected by shareholders. So if you have a share, if you own a share, you have a vote, and the members are voted on by all of the shareholders. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And also, representatives of the subsidiary entities. So that's what I've listed down below. And also actually the military commission, I think is probably likely to be represented on the finance board, explicitly represented on the board of finance. But in that case, the subsidiary entity will in itself have its own process for deciding who is appointed to the board of finance on their behalf.
So this feels to me very much like IRL corporate culture in a little bit, correct?
I guess as regards the shareholders voting a bit, but I think in real life they tend to vote more directly on issues, whereas here the board of finance decides on issues and they are just appointed by shareholders. I don't know that for sure, but I think that might be the case.
Cool. Ownership, Bill. Can I talk about ownership?
But before, just the thing about no individual may hold two memberships of the Board of Finance. So if you're appointed as the representative of the Western office, you cannot also be voted in by shareholders.
Is that because one time someone did hold two members and there was problems with that, so they had to retcon and be all like, no lads, we can't do that anymore?
Probably not in the history of the Tamar company, but it's probably something that's happened in other older companies and that they knew to write in a block against. They knew to write in that it was not permitted.
Cool. I like. Ownership, Bill. Mm-hmm. Ownership of this company shall be divided into equal shares that may be freely traded. Ownership of a single share grants a single vote in matters pertaining to membership of the Board of Finance. The possible alternative here that's sprung to mind, like this reads perfectly fine, like that makes perfect sense. But I've been looking a little bit into how German football works. This is related, bear with me. And in Germany, apparently there's, I don't know much about it, so Germans, please feel free to correct me here, but apparently there's a rule where a football club must be fan owned, which is this 50+1 rule, which I think, if I recall correctly, means that 51% of the company has to be fan owned. So you can have your big mogul owning 49%, but 51% must be the people. And therefore that means there is a kind of unequal sort of voting power going on, skewed in favor of the fans, because that's obviously the system. It just got me thinking, this line about divided equally shares, it got me thinking about could you set up a corporate structure a bit like the Bundesliga, that has this sort of weighting going on to favor one thing or the other, as opposed to you have a share and that share is equal no matter who you are. That's not really a question, just amusing more than anything else.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm sure you have kind of examples of cooperatives that work that way, and worker-owned organizations that work that way. But as we have previously established, the Abeski aren't super keen on the old labor rights.
Understatement of the century there. Cool, and that's all the notes I have highlighted. As always, what have I missed and what would you like to point out?
So, subsidiary entities are not permitted to issue shares, can issue bonds and loans. I think that's all fairly straightforward. The company fleet, I thought it would make sense to have an explicit explanation of how the commercial and the explicitly militaristic side of the company interacted. So the vessels are somewhat autonomous, that the captain is in charge and they get orders from the military commission, but they will be assigned to a certain task, and it will usually be given to one of the subsidiary entities, like one of the offices. So if your patrol vessel is being sent to Hoitan, then the military commission will give you orders that you are to go to Hoitan and to place you under the jurisdiction of the local commander there, whoever it is. That's roughly how that works. The subsidiary entities, I'm actually going to refer to the map for explaining what's going on with these.
Links in the show notes.
Links in the show notes. So remember a year or maybe a little bit more ago, I gave you a map of the Abesk region. Mm-hmm. Do you have that there?
Yep, got it.
Great. So you can see here, I'll just go through roughly where the each of the offices has responsibility for. So the Western Office covers between, basically west of Mearsphere. So any operations between Jikav and Mearsphere and further west than Jikav and the Selin Lake, and as far south as that line of mountains there. Mm-hmm. That runs west to east. The Eastern Office is then on the other side from Mearsphere to Otvev.
Yes.
The Southern Office is kind of the region above Lansk and like running from Lansk to Vilv, that sort of rectangular area there, and the province of Vikol.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
The Usen Office. Now, the Usen Office, see if you look to the west of Lansk, you've got this little triangle with the mountains on top and then mountains and the river to the south.
Yep.
So that's the Usen province. And then, so the Usen office is responsible for that, and then the whole area beyond the Usen belt.
Okay, yep.
The Anshes office is responsible for the Anshes and as far south as Ebwar.
Mm-hmm.
The Trans-Olyen office is responsible for Atramia and Nalmia. The Olyen is that river running from Vilv to Otvev and into the sea. That's the Olyen, so it's on the far side of that. Mm-hmm. And the Hoitan office then is responsible for Hoitan.
Yeah.
Unsurprisingly.
That makes sense. I haven't seen this map in ages. It looks really cool.
Thank you.
I really enjoy this map. We need to refer to this map more when we're talking about the various things, because we're always like, oh yeah, Mearsphere, and then like it occurs to me that I noted where Mearsphere was once over a year ago, and now I'm like, oh, Mearsphere was way up north. Totally forgotten that. I may even, if I had the time, I don't know if I will, I may even throw just little borders on that map for people to see where these various jurisdictions are.
Yeah, sure.
If I have the time, I don't hold me to that internet. Cool.
I mean, I can give you a sketch with that on it if you have the original file and you want to add stuff to it. I can just draw out the approximate.
Do it. Definitely, let's do that, because that'll be really easy to follow people.
I did have other thoughts that I couldn't kind of figure out how to make explicit in a constitution. So the subsidiary entities can be obviously created and dissolved as appropriate. And in the example of the Usen office, that Usen province area, that triangular area, probably would have been the responsibility of the Southern office previously, but a proposal was made and probably a lot of capital was invested by someone to set that up as an office in itself and open up the area beyond the belt as an extension of it. Mm-hmm. So they're somewhat fluid, and the offices kind of work fairly independently, potentially at odds with each other at times, in competition with each other. But overall, they all generate whatever profits or things that they generate. A significant cut of that is passed up to the Board of Finance, and as I said, the Board of Finance decides how to spend the funds it has. Shares are a thing, as you can see. You can buy shares, but the financial culture hasn't gone very far in kind of the secondary market of like reselling shares or speculating on the future or the future profits of shares. That isn't a thing that's really begun yet. So you can't like the very, very high finance stuff of it isn't really an element here. Let me just look over the notes I took while I was coming up with this and see if there's anything else I've missed. Does it make sense? I
mean, yes. Like, does your prose, does the actual constitution make sense?
I mean, like, does the system I'm describing, does it make sense? Like, does it seem like it would operate? Like, there's nothing that doesn't make sense to you about how where things go or what things happen?
No. Everything seems perfectly in order. There's nothing in it that I think, oh God, Bill has broken his system here. No, I think it all works.
Okay, cool. There may be other stuff that I am forgetting to bring up, but I think I've got the general shape of it. I mean, like, there can be different specifics. Like I've just said there is a board of finance. I haven't talked about its voting procedures or its memberships or anything. But that's a little bit more fluid anyway.
Sure.
That can change from time to time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And well, I mean, I guess maybe that is probably something that would be codified in a constitution.
Oh yeah, like there are rules for it, but they're not constitutional. They are
sure.
changed. You know, they're legislative, for want of a better word.
Sure, that makes sense. Yeah, no, I think that works. I like it. It's good. I think the map with the regions is going to help though, so we should definitely do that.
Okay, cool. Yeah, well, I'll try send that to you later today. So
awesome sauce. Cool. Constitution of Tomorrow Company done? Question mark and Terabang.
Done. Check mark. Tick.
Check mark. Excellent. Let's do some Worst World Lang Review Showcase thing. Have you watched these videos?
I have watched these videos.
So there's not a whole bunch to talk about here. There's one point I want to bring up. For anyone who doesn't know or is not following the channel for whatever reason, part of this sort of like quasi hiatus strategy of mine to sort of like ease up the workload, but to also try and keep some degree of videos coming over the next weeks and months, is doing this showcase thing where I write into people, or people write into me and submit their worlds and languages for review or showcase. And I was kind of like a little bit hesitant to do it because I thought like, oh, there's no real way of doing it without kind of like coming across as a bit of a dick, just saying this bit's bad, redo this bit, don't like this bit. But apparently people don't think that way, and they're actually really happy with the sort of like constructive criticisms. And I'm having much more fun doing this than I thought I would do. Like, it's really cool to just like go into the inbox in the morning and to be flooded with various weird and wonderful creations, and it's really great fun. So I'm pleasantly surprised that emergency hiatus content is actually turning out to be very fulfilling. So it's really cool. Do you have anything to bring up with regards to videos? Any points? And then I might close with my point.
There's something very satisfying about the micro level of this, because we just see like a little snapshot or a single concept, and you know, very often we get presented with like quite broad world building or big ideas or a lot of information, but just saying, you know, there's just this one location or this one concept, it's kind of cool.
Yep.
I liked all of them. They were all inventive, and I got something out of all of them. There was an interesting comparison to make. The one from Game Saucer.
Yes.
Which was the origin myth, the different gods. There was an interesting comparison to make there with Dane Mead's one, which I think was in the same video.
Yeah.
Which was about the kind of the cosmological origin of magic. And I thought there was something quite similar in both of them. Almost that you could look at Game Saucer's creation myth as a mythological interpretation of what Dane Mead was describing scientifically.
Oh, that's great.
See what I'm getting at?
That is so good. I am mortified I didn't think of that. That would have been a wonderful way of tying those two up. You're dead right. That is brilliant. Like, the actual science is as Dane Mead describes, but like culture interprets it like Game Saucer put forth. That's a really good idea. That's a good shout, Bill.
That was just one of the things that occurred to me. The sport, that was really the Tal Haidor sport was real fun. Although I'm going to disagree with you on something here.
Oh dear. We'll have an argument.
We are an argument over sports. I've never been so confirmed in my masculinity. there was the thing about the fights, right? Mm-hmm. And you were saying like it would be really easy to exploit, and I completely agree with that. But by just getting one of your other players to attack their star player, and that it would be a totally unfair fight because it would be just a regular person against a star athlete.
Sure.
Well, a star athlete isn't necessarily going to be a good fighter. And being good at playing the sport isn't the same as being good at combat. And there's that's a thing in ice hockey. There's a role for players in ice hockey to just start fights and be ready to fight the other team. And presumably they have to be reasonably good at actually playing hockey as well. But it is a role assigned within a team.
That's fair. Now, the impression I didn't get the impression there was kind of like a defined role, like the fighter. The impression I got was that anyone can become the fighter if they accept the challenge.
No, I know.
Okay,
And like,
okay,
it's the same in ice hockey. Like, anyone can get in a scrap. But, you might have someone on the team who's a bit more adept at either starting fights or intervening when a fight starts. And, it doesn't necessarily mean that they might not be a better actual player, although presumably they'll be a good player. But their role will be more so weighted towards fighting than towards scoring goals.
That's a good point. I take that. Your criticism is valid. What I thought immediately after actually filming that, I thought of another way of kind of thinking about not reinterpreting but rewriting the rules slightly. Would be the notion of champions. So if a fight breaks out, the two parties involved can assign champions, and that would be a way of if we take my view about the star athlete being also like just the star athlete being just amazing at everything, which I now see as a bit flawed. But if we take that view, if you assign champions, then that kind of mitigates that exploit in a way, and I think brings in a level of strategy where it's like the team have to confer and go, well, like Bob took a lot of hits. Now Bob would ordinarily be the person to fight, but he took a lot of hits, so maybe we'll sacrifice this guy. And I think that could be a way of circumventing a possible exploit.
It's like having someone like to take penalties.
I mean, yeah, but like that's kind of what happens. Like the person who goes down in the box in soccer, they don't have to be the penalty taker.
Exactly.
Yeah. And all just really quick as well on the subject of hockey. I know nothing about hockey other than it's played on ice. What is that crack with the fighting though? Like, is that actually okay within the rules, or is it just tolerated conduct? Like, do the rules say it is permissible to strike people and there should be no punishment, or what is the crack there? Like, how did they get away with clobbering each other the whole time?
I don't know enough about it, but I think it is a cultural rather than explicit thing. I don't think it's actually allowed by the letter of the law, but it's really, really common.
That's mad. Like, and sport increasingly for me, because I watch a lot of sport and a lot of diverse sports, the impression of it is that increasingly it's becoming a safer institution. Like Formula One, for example, they're constantly ramping up safety measures and changing the rules to make things safer. Football over the years has gotten rid of an awful lot of soccer, should I say, has gotten rid of an awful lot of dangerous practices in the view of safety, which is a good thing. It seems strange to me, knowing nothing about ice hockey, that it's just like that's still tolerated, like out and out fights, because like obviously that like out and out fights you run the risk of like massively damaging someone, and not damaging someone in as a result of playing the game in a way, but damaging someone as a result of like an extracurricular fight.
Yeah.
It seems weird the way the modern world is going with regards to sport, and ice hockey seems not to be doing that. Now again, I know nothing about ice hockey, so I could be entirely wrong, and in fact fighting is on its way out. I don't know. I'm sure our Canadians will let us know. But yeah, I've always thought hockey is just being strange that way.
Yeah. I'm interested about it. Especially because I like actual combat sports to see how it works here. That fighting it's not part of the rules, but it's a thing that happens, and presumably it has its own unofficial codes of conduct for how you're supposed to do it or whatever. I don't know.
Oh, I'd love to know. Canadians who are into ice hockey, let us know. Are there unofficial codes of conducts there? Like, what? If I am to get in a scrap with Bill in the ring, what do I kind of have to culturally be aware of? Let us know, because like there must be something like. That would be really interesting. Yeah. Any further points to bring up on the videos?
No, I don't think so. No. Good work, everyone. Yeah. Keep it up.
So my point that I want to bring up was just a question I want to put to you, Bill. I got slightly berated in the most recent World Lang Review Showcase Thing video for bringing up color blindness in relation to flag design.
Yeah.
The comments ran the gamut from like just outright mean to kind of like quizzical, and people were like, why talk about color blindness when flags back in the day were definitely not constructed with color blindness in mind? Like, you know, no one sat down in Hungary whatever after the dissolution of the Austro-Hungarian Empire and went, okay, we need to make sure that this red and this green really work together. They just chose a red and green fabric from the dyes that are available, you know, without thinking about color blindness. So people were kind of like, is it right's the wrong word, but is it advisable to think in terms of color blindness when we're trying to design flags for ye olde countries? Is it more historically appropriate to not think in terms of color blindness? What are your thoughts on this?
That was something that did occur to me as I watched it. And my initial reaction was kind of similar. It was like, oh, but you know, that's not necessarily a relevant in-universe thing. But then I kind of reckoned we have to be conscious of ableism and accessibility and stuff in the stories and the art that we create. So it is relevant from that point of view. And as I recall, that was for a web comic or web series. The flags were. So you've got it's not invalid to consider it from that point of view. Like, you have a real life audience who you want to be reading this thing, and it's good to make it accessible to people.
Yeah,
you know?
that
and
was,
also,
yeah.
I would imagine that it is probably a thing in contemporary design to account for that kind of thing, or if it isn't, again, it would think that ought to be considered. So it may in fact be relevant to the setting, and even if it's not contemporary necessarily, then I mean, maybe within the setting people do care about color blindness, so go for it.
Yeah, the thing I think people didn't, or I didn't make very clear, was that like I would never expect someone to make that explicit, you know, to be, you know, character A and character B sit down together and be like, have you heard the king is creating a new flag? And then character B, like, you know, in the story, in the novel goes, oh, and he's being very particular about his color choices for the blind people. Like that is obviously massively jarring. My point would be that like doing these little colorblind checks has no impact at all on the believability of these flags. Like, because again, if I do a color check on the new Hungary flag after the dissolution of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and I choose appropriate shades of red and green, the consumer of my content is still going to look at the flag and go, it's red, white, and green. I think that's the flag of Hungary. I hope. I think it is. Yeah. They're going to go.
The one you used as an example for that bit of the video was very like the Hungarian flag.
It was, yes. I think that's probably why I'm immediately jumping to Hungary in my mind now. But like, yeah, no consumer of the content is going to go, oh wait, that's historically inaccurate because I can tell that particular shade of green and that particular shade of red has been chosen with color blindness in mind. Like, no one can see these things. The only person who would realize these things would be someone who's colorblind, and they'll just be all like, oh, I appreciate that, pal, thanks.
Yeah.
It doesn't make them any more or less, if you hide your work, it doesn't make the flags any more or less historically believable, I think, in my mind.
Yeah, that's fair.
Now, it'd be a different thing if, I don't know, like, let's say you included, I can't think of a good example, so just bear with this, an imperfect analogy. If you included a representation of sign language, say on a flag, like that would be obviously, very jarring. Even though it would be a nod to people who speak sign language to be like, oh, cool, a bit of ASL on this flag, that's really cool. But it would be really jarring historically wise. But color selection, no, as long as the colors are,
Not if it was the in-universe sign language, like.
Yeah.
Flags have text on them.
Sure, I mean more as in like our sign language, as in like you write in Skyrim there is a flag that has ASL on it because someone's like, let's give a nod to the ASL people, which is a good thing, but it would be extremely jarring and feel like it's not property of that world. But
I mean,
tweaking shades of color, there's no way anyone can spot that unless you're colorblind.
Like, I see what you're saying there, and my initial reaction is to agree. But also, I mean, why can we gloss over the use of Latin script?
Oh,
and
yeah,
not find
that's
that
fair.
jarring?
I guess that's interesting. I guess that's probably because there is like historical precedent in terms of how we create our fiction. So like there is a precedent that like the standard language in a setting is always going to be English in the English speaking. Like it's Star Wars people speak English and that's their basic, and that's just, there's precedence for that. Or there's precedence for using the Latin script everywhere just because that's what we need to use. So I guess anytime you go against that precedent, it seems weird and jarring in a way that using the Latin script wouldn't be.
Yeah. I think that is
though.
probably true, but I think that's worth examining and worth interrogating.
Oh, sure. Yeah, 100% agree. 100% agree. But yeah, point still holds. I would always strongly recommend doing the little color check and then just never telling anyone about it. And just knowing that people who are colorblind will look at it and be all like, that's nice.
Yeah.
I think that's a good working protocol to go by.
Sure.
So that is all I have to say about World Language Review Showcase thing. More of them coming, like I said, because this is kind of hiatus content. Hopefully, I can get back to Artifexian proper, because I got a pronouns video in the bag, or at least in the works, and I really want to make it because it's gonna be really fun.
Oh, that wasn't just like a hypothetical future one. That is the next one you have planned. That
is literally the next one I've planned.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. And I really do want to make it, because turns out pronouns way more interesting than you think.
Yeah.
In terms of like linguistically, I don't want to talk about it now because of spoilers.
Yeah.
But I can't wait to make it. I just really hope I find the time over next weeks and months. But if not, more World Lang Review Showcase thing. Check out the videos in the description, and submit as well. I'll leave the submission criteria in the description as well. So
yeah, please do.
You can check it out. All right, okay, cool. Shall we go into Green Room?
Let's Green Room.
On Shomra Gloss. Green Room. Two things, Bank of Artifexia and a plug. In the previous videos, or in the previous one of my videos, I gave a shout out to a chap called Joshua Geem and his first time novel, Heaven's Expedition. I'm not being paid for this on this show to talk about Joshua. I'm just want to give the guy an extra shout out because I really did genuinely enjoy his book. It was very fun. And it was hugely applicable to Artifexia. So strongly urge people to go pick up the book, Heaven's Expedition by Joshua Geem. It's a sort of like YA style, rip-roaring sort of like action-packed adventure, set on a tightly locked world, and that's the key thing that I think has interest for people in Artifexia. Joshua explores the culture around tightly locked worlds, and how they organize the time, how they organize like sleep cycles, given that there's no real day night going on. All that sort of jazz is brought up in the book, and it's done really well, and it's a ton of fun. And Joshua also came across as just being a really chill, lovely bloke. So support independent first-time novelists. Go check it out if that is to your liking. Links in the show notes.
Cool.
Okay, so that's that. Thanks again. Oh, and also, thanks again, Joshua, for reaching out and sponsoring the show. It was really great of you, and I hope I can drive some traffic to you. So that's the extra little plug. Bank of Artifexia bill. So this month's contributor to the Bank of Artifexia is myself and my family. I found a heap of notes in our house that I have now come into possession of, and I'm adding them to the Bank of Artifexia. So links in the show notes, everyone, you can go check it out. So what I have, again, links in the show notes, I have Deutschmark, so old German pre-Euro currency. I have a 10 Deutschmark, a 20 Deutschmark, and 100 Deutschmark. So I'm a ye olde baller here, rolling in the money. I have Saudi Rial, 5 Saudi Rial. Now, this is, as with the Deutschmark, this is old money. So according to my research, I could be wrong, but according to my research, this 5 Saudi Rial was out of date in 1984. So that's awesome.
Okay.
It's a very old note, and I really like it. I have 1 Australian dollary do. And this is also out of date and also withdrawn apparently in 1984. Again, I could be wrong, but it's certainly not modern currency. This one in particular, I want to give a shout out for kind of very cool design. It does a good job, and I think a much better job than the current Australian note I have, of kind of like incorporating the cultures at play in Australia. Obviously, the Anglo-Saxon culture, like the Queen's on it, looking very young. And on the reverse, or the obverse,
I didn't recognise her.
I know, right? I listened to her speech that she gave on Veterans Day this year, and she's 94, man. She looks like she's just after retirement. No, maybe not. She looks like she's 70 odd. Like, whatever that woman is taking, I want some of. Like, she's just immortal. It's crazy. It must be the reptile blood. But yeah, so anyhow, this Australian dollar is really cool because it has the Queen on it, but it also has an awful lot of what looks like Aboriginal art, and a lot of the kind of like the design language of this is very informed by Aboriginal art. So I think it does a good job of melding the cultures. And for a note that's ostensibly like brown, it actually is really nice. So I really enjoy that note. I think it's really cool. And then we have 20, what is this, Kenyan Shillings. Again, old, expired in 1982, apparently. This wasn't withdrawn in 1982. This is a note that's marked as being 1st of January 1982. So when this went out, I don't know, but it was around in 1982. And again, I really dig the artwork on the back of this lad. It's got this cool like Afro pointillism vibe to it, which I think is really baller. Really, really looks great. So I enjoy that one. And then we have 250 Cypriot mil. I think it's pronounced mil. Could be meal. I don't know. But yeah, again, this is very old. This is 1964 is when this was out of circulation or made. I can't remember. So it's shocking old, and it's actually a little bit fragile to hold. So that's class. Can add that to the stockpile. And then finally finish up with 20 French franc. And this note is an abomination, and I hate it. Like, it is so, maybe it's weathered and faded over time. That could probably be it, but it's so meh. Like, if you squint your eyes, like blur your eyes out and look at it, it looks essentially like a teabag stained sheet of paper. Like, it's just, it's lots and lots of brown with no contrast. Like, the back of it, the 20, the number 20 is essentially blurring into the background. Like, it's just, it looks awful. And there's this giant white patch that's obviously the hologram or whatever, but it's weird that it's just sticking there like someone forgot to finish the artwork. It's just, I don't like this at all. I know, actually, do you know what it looks a little bit like? It looks a little bit like a postcard as well. And I don't think
it does look a bit like a postcard, yeah.
I don't dig the French francs at all. But there you go. Anyhow, that's 20 French franc, and apparently that was issued in 1997. This note was issued, so that's pretty cool. So I rated
Not around for very long. Oh, that specific note, not that design.
That specific note, yeah. It just said, like all it says in 1997 is marked on the back, so I don't know how long it's been around for. But yeah, so raided the family's coffers there, to get a whole bunch of monies, which I think is really cool. The Deutschmark as well. Sorry, I'll just go back to Deutschmark. Deutschmark looks shocking. It looks shocking Germanic here, right? And I'm allowed to insult Germans because I'm half German, so just brace Germans. It looks very much like a German solution to like money notes. It's like, it's elegant. It's like good design. Everything kind of works.
Efficient, clean lines,
but fills me with no enthusiasm at all. Like, it's nuts. It is baller that they have my man Karl Friedrich Gauss there. Who's the other lady? The other lady? No, this is Antoinette von Dorst Hülshoff. I don't know who she is. And then this lady is Clara Schumann. Oh, they have Clara Schumann
on the 20.
No, on the 100.
On the 100.
Clara Schumann.
And that's why there's a piano on the other side of it. Okay.
That would make sense, Bill. That would make sense.
Hold on. What's on the reverse of the 20? Looks like a cigar?
No, man, that's a feather.
It's a Oh, okay. So she was a writer.
Oh, was she a writer? Do you want to do a quick Google there of
if that's a quill, I guess so.
Annette von Durst Hulstoff. Hold on, Annette. Let me do a quick Google. Annette von Dorste Hulstoff. I'm going to get it in German, am I? Oh, no, so she was a writer, a 19th century German writer and composer.
Oh,
She was one of the most important German poets and author of the novella Die Judenbuche. So the young books, or the books of youth. No, Juden being Jews, sorry. The Jews Buche? I don't know what this is, hold on. The Jews' beach, apparently. Beach is in the tree.
Okay.
I completely misread that wrong. My German is just not up to scratch. But anyhow, so those are the whole heap of notes I got. And yeah, I'm very happy with the raid I came up with. The money map, unfortunately, is not affected because these are all like out of date. And lots of them are doubled for, euro, for example. So like Germany is still green because I have the euro for Germany, but also have some old stuff. Lots of new notes, but the money map is unaffected. Money map in the show notes, by the way. So if anyone has some currency from the countries that I haven't got and you would like to send a letter that we read out on air, check the show notes for all the relevant stuff. We would love to hear from you.
Cool. Can we look at the people on the other notes?
Let's look at the people on the other notes. Do you want to start?
Who's this on the Saudi note? I guess it's someone from the House of Saud.
I would imagine some prince. I can't read Arabic, man, so I have no idea who this is.
Of course, yeah. It's going to be, well,
I used to be able to read Arabic, though.
Really?
Yeah, my dad taught it to me because he learned it when he was in Saudi Arabia. I used to sign all my paintings with my name in Arabic, and I've forgotten how to do that completely. Which like it's it is, but it's kind of like I don't want to be massive social justice warrior here or anything, but like it's kind of cultural appropriation that I kind of wish my father was a little bit more sort of like think about what you're doing here. Like, is it appropriate, Edgar, for you to kind of like just sign your name in Arabic letters? Like, why are you doing that? You're not really Arabic. You have no tie to the tradition of Saudi Arabia, the artistic tradition of Saudi Arabia. You're just kind of doing it because it's like, oh, it's kind of cool and I know how to write in Arabic. Like, it's a bit, I don't know. I don't really like the practice. Like, you should just sign your name in your own language. Like, it'd be one thing if you had an Irish name. Like, there is no Irish version of Edgar Grunwald, but like, you have an Irish version of your name. Like, signing a painting in that is, I think, entirely appropriate. It shows where you come from. It shows the cultural context you stew in. But just whacking your name in Arabic on a thing because it's like, that's cool and foreign is kind of like...
Yeah, just using a culture as an aesthetic. Yeah, I see. And I would always have similar concerns.
But I mean, but there's always a flip side, because the flip side would be that my father introduced me to the concept of the Arabic script at an early age, and
Yeah, and I mean, you were born in Saudi Arabia, like, so.
I was, yeah, but I can't claim any sort of Saudi
No, I know.
heritage is not even the word, because I'm only there for
know.
like a year and I don't remember any of it. So yeah. So I don't. So he's probably some dude from the Prince of Saud, the House of Saud.
Yeah, I'm looking here. It looks like on all of the series 5 and 6. Oh no, it's not. They're not all on the. No, hold on. Let me figure this out. Yeah, the watermark on all of the series 5 ones is King Abdullah. Now, some of them are King Abdullah bin Abdulaziz Al Saud, and then the last one, the 500 Riyal, just says King Abdulaziz Al Saud. So that must be his son.
Bill, why is it that we? What causes a culture to want to have extremely long names? Like,
No idea.
What is the reason? Okay, I'd love to know the reason why. Like, a lot of Portuguese names as well tend to have a gazillion words in them. And I know obviously the Saudi princes tend to have a lot. Maybe it's possibly a thing like, Bob, son of John, great grandson of Henry the Third, or whatever. Maybe it's something, a construction like that. I don't know. But yeah, it always struck me, even from an early age, being all like, wait, so we're called John Smith, and like at a push, maybe John Henry Smith, but then there's other cultures that have like a gazillion names. Like, why, and what's the cultural reason? I'd love to know that. Anyone who is Portuguese, by the way, let us know, because I'm pretty sure you're famous for having extremely long names. But yeah, so that some prince guy. Now, have you done?
Yeah, so I guess it's whoever it's the king of Saudi Arabia at the time.
Now we know who Queen Elizabeth is. She is the immortal. She's the Methuselah.
Vaguely familiar, all right. There's no one on the Cypriot money, right?
No, there appears to be some sort of civic scene. It's very hard to see because it's so worn, but some sort of just picture of architecture or whatever, and then some olives. Who's the dude in the painting for the France thing? Do we know?
That is, I think it's Debussy.
Oh, so someone painted Debussy, or Debussy didn't paint?
Not to my knowledge, but I mean, I don't think Carl Friedrich Gauss did either.
Debussy, for anyone who doesn't know, is a quote classical composer. 20th century, early 20th century.
Yeah, Impressionist era, so late 19th, early 20th century.
Yeah, he also was shilling for big whole tone scale. That's a joke that the music nerds will hopefully get and appreciate. And then, so we have Debussy, that's pretty cool. And then on the Kenyan money, I'm going to work on the assumption that we're looking at a president of some description. We are. It says it on note. The president of the Republic of Kenya, Daniel Torotich Arap Moi, president of the Republic of Kenya.
Oh, he only died this year.
He only died this year.
Yeah, Daniel Arap Moi. Moi.
Wow.
Moi.
Yeah. So that's Mahal, Bill. I thought I'd bring it up.
Nice.
No. And that's all I have for the Artifexian, for the podcast, Bill.
Cool.
All right. So as always, thanks everyone for listening and supporting the show. Thanks for picking up merch, all of that sort of jazz. Again, apologies for this forthcoming period. It's going to be a bit tumultuous, but hopefully everything will be back on the road as soon as possible. So Bill and I will see you at the earliest convenient date. Until then,
Edgar out.
out.